Hi, hello everyone. I see that you already started greeting each other in the chat. I'm very happy to see you all here. My name is Olga. I run partner marketing initiatives here at Survicate. And before we start, I think you already can see the speakers. And before we start, let me briefly tell you about Survicate and Custify, our partners. So Survicate is a customer feedback platform that collects feedback across multiple channels, uses AI to turn it into actionable insights that you can defend and deliver to any channels that you use and any platforms that you already use. And here we're joined today by our partners, Custify. And Custify is a customer success platform built for SaaS teams, centralizing customer data into a single view and turning it into automated, customizable health scores. I see that we had quite a lot of people registering today, so I'm giving you all few more minutes to join. The webinar will be recorded for sure, so if you need to kind of jump off halfway, please don't. But in case you really need to, you will get the recording and a surprise at the end. So, oh my God, Shanghai, Texas, Paris. Oh, I hope that weather in all these locations is way better than here in Dublin. So I'm in Dublin, Ireland, and it's really gray and like what you would think of Ireland, I guess. So we have like a very like I
all
think
over the globe,
diverse.
world. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Hi, everybody.
That's great.
So cool. All right. So I think that we are kind of there. So not to delay any further, we will have approximately 40 minutes of our speakers talking about Churn Autopsy, and I'm very excited about this topic. I have to admit I did hear it beforehand, and it's really exciting, and I really like all the knowledge pieces that both ladies will be sharing with you today. So if you have any questions, do ask them here in the chat. We will try to cover as much as we possibly can at the end. If not, then just reach out to both speakers in private, or you can do LinkedIn or anything like this. I'm pretty sure that they will be very happy to share their knowledge afterwards. So without any further ado, I am really happy to introduce Eylul, who is our Chief Customer Officer at Survicate, and she has a very particular allergy, and she's allergic to the I guess decisions. So for the past over 6 years, she has already helped a lot of customers to make data-driven decisions and reduce churn and do the right thing with their customers. And she will be joined on the stage here today by Irina. She's head of customer success and customer support from Custify, and she's a believer in the empathy-driven leadership, and she cares deeply about customers and about success of these customers. So she, at Custify, she's responsible for KPI frameworks and workflows that keep retention strong and churn low. So, ladies, the stage is yours. And yeah, everyone welcome. And I am leaving right now, but I will be supporting you there backstage.
Okay, thank you, Olga. See you later then. All right. So, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And it is amazing to see such a diverse crowd today from everywhere. So, the ones that are joining us after your working hours, thank you. The ones that are joining us early in the morning, thank you too. So, everyone, so welcome. Okay, now let's maybe jump right into it. We did the housekeeping. Okay, so before Irina and I kind of get into the health scores and everything, I want to kind of put an account in front of you and leave it there for the rest of the session. because today we are going to be doing an autopsy. So this is Northwind. Of course, Northwind isn't real. It's a composite account. However, every single thing that happens to this account is a pattern that both Irina and I see constantly. Northwind is a B2B SaaS company from mid-market. They both a B2B2. They signed a 1-year annual contract. They bought 12 seats. Their champion during the purchase process and later was their VP of operations. She ran the evaluation, picked the tool, and the reason they both was that they wanted to kill kind of like a manual process running on spreadsheets across sort of 3 teams. And what we know is that they canceled at month 12 at their renewal. And on the cancellation, there was one explanation that anybody ever wrote down. It was that product is too expensive, and that's the reason for cancellation. And this is the year as everybody kind of saw it at the time, right? What matters here is the month 2. They had 4 active seats out of 12, and those 4, they use it heavily every day. And which means that depending on how your score is built, this could actually read green because you have 4 enthusiastic users. They average the health score out nicely. But of course, Irina will later tell you if I'm being unfair here. Now, at month 5, they get sent an annual NPS. 2 people answered. We received 2 sevens, and there were no detractors. At month 9, their health score kind of finally dropped to an amber. Then at month 12, they canceled. Now, I'll be honest with you. If I'd been looking at this account kind of like around month 6, I wouldn't have flagged this account at all. Everything looks perfectly fine. But now let's run it backwards. At month 12, they canceled, except this actually isn't when they decided to cancellation, right? Now, let's look at month 10. What happened in the background? The new owners had already run a tech stack review, saw something isn't working, and they already picked something else. A step back, at month 5, the champion, they give a 7. There are no promoters, 0 detractors, and you don't have any promoters, you don't have any detractors, but you have 2 passives. And the contribution of passives to the score is precisely nothing. But taking a step further, where did it actually break? So here is ours, the hypothesis is that at week 3, the ops person here tries to connect the product to the systems where the data kind of actually lives. 2 of them, they don't connect the way that everyone assumed. So for about like a week, they tried to do it by hand, and then they kind of stopped. They didn't open a ticket, didn't write anything to the support. So nobody at the vendors end ever found out what actually happened to this account. So that means the actual time of that, week 3, the time that they actually had the decision was month 5, and they had the discovery around month 12. And the cost of that we record is the price. So now you know who our patient is. We'll come back to them later and name what kind of actually killed it. But for now, this is the question that I want to leave on the table for the rest of the session. What would have to be true in the health score for anybody to notice the churn signal on week 3?
Yes, this is a great introduction, and I think this is really something that all of us that are attending today have seen. So again, it's an imaginary account, but it's an account that showed green until the end, when the reason for cancellation was that the subscription was too expensive. So now let's see what happened. And this timeline is, 1 second, also show. Yeah, okay. So yeah, basically this is a timeline that is really worth to sit with, because it's the exact pattern that shows up wherever a CS team is early in building out health scoring, a score that's technically true based on facts. So we saw that all the signs were green, and all the signals were actually looking good, but there was still something missing, something that was actually really important. So notice where it actually shifted for anyone watching the account was month 9, when the score drifted to amber. That's 4 months after the one sentiment reading we had, right? And 6 months after the account was already lost, because it happened in the beginning in the onboarding. So I'd say that the sentiment part is the part of the score that teams trust the most, but it's also the part with the most holes in it, if it's not correctly interpreted, of course. Now, there are 3 things. Let's look at them. There are 3 things that the sentiment can tell you, right? So let's start with the obvious one. It's self-reported. You're not measuring how the customer feels. You're measuring what they were willing to type into a survey box in that day. And these things are not the same thing. And I will give you a personal example because I think it's exactly the same mechanism. And it might have happened to anybody here. At some point, I was on holiday in Greece this summer, and it was a great place. The room, but the room wasn't that comfortable. And the staff, though, they were lovely, very friendly. The business was obviously in the beginning, so they really needed some good reviews there. And because they were super friendly and the staff was great with me, although the accommodation was not great, I gave them at the end an 8. So that 8 says nothing about the comfort problem or the fact that the air conditioning was not working or anything like this, but it says that the people were friendly enough that I felt bad rating them lower than that. And this is something that customers can also do. They can love how people treat them, although they are not getting value from the product, and give you a higher rating, because also giving an 8, it doesn't require the conversation that a 3 score does. So it's also comfortable to give some higher rating sometimes. A second problem, it only reaches the people who respond, and response isn't random. So the accounts likely to answer a survey are the ones that are already engaged and are already opening the emails and are already talking to the CS team. But the ones that stopped replying, that stopped opening your app, is exactly the account you'll never hear from, that will never answer the survey. So your sentiment scores end up built almost entirely out of people who were never at risk in the first place. And third, sentiment tells you nothing about whether anyone is actually in the product. You can have a glowing response sitting next to a login history that's been flat for 6 weeks. And the survey doesn't know that. The survey doesn't know how your users are interacting with the product. So if sentiment is all you're looking at, neither do you. And looking at our account, the only sentiment data point on record is one word in the churn result field at the end, price, and that came off an exit survey. And this is a moment in the relationship where customers are actually responding because they're already leaving and have nothing left to lose by telling you why. And that's sentiment working exactly as design is still told us nothing until month 12. So sentiment can tell you how someone feels when they bother to say so. It can tell you what happened when someone gone quiet.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Irina, for that. I of course agree with all of that. It's self-reported, and the sentiment, of course, only reaches the people who bother to answer it, and it obviously tells you nothing about whether anybody sort of actually logged in. These are, of course, the real limits of only customer sentiment. But how about usage-only scores? Right. Let's talk about that a little bit. So usage data is, of course, the most honest data that you have. Nobody has to be in the mood to produce it. Like, it arrives sort of either way without being prompted, which is kind of exactly why it's sort of has always been the load bearing in every health score that I've built too. But there is this one specific thing that it can't do, and it's not the flow, it's just kind of how it's designed. So usage, let me bring this up. So usage tells you when whether they showed up or not, but it doesn't tell you whether they actually got anywhere. It shows you kind of the presence, but it doesn't really it cannot really show you the progress. And a score that's built only on the presence will tell you that account is fine right up until sort of somebody quietly gives up. So what I mean by progress, first, the outcome that they actually bought for. Every customer has two goals. They have the product outcome, and then they have the success outcome. A metaphor that I really like, not mine, but I really like to use here, is sort of purchasing a drill to put a picture on the wall. Usage signals, they will see that they drilled a hole on the wall, but it will not see whether they were actually hang the picture. So second, friction, because friction can be really silent, right? Customers who hit a wall in your product, they don't always sort of complain. They can quietly stall, they can give up. And in the usage data, unfortunately, there is not going to be an event called they gave up. And finally, sort of who the person actually is. To a usage score, a seed is a seed. It can't really see that the human who cared about the product, the purchase, they kind of had fled the promises. So where does that leave us? Basically, a good health score needs two kinds of signal. You have your value signals, which tell you whether the product is being used and working. And you also have the relationship signals, which tell you whether the people on the other end are actually hitting their success outcome. Usage gives you the first, but it cannot give you the second. And a sentiment on its own has sort of every problem that Irina listed a moment ago. It cannot carry a score by itself. So short story long, a good health score needs both. It doesn't have to be perfect. If your score sort of predicts churn and expansion at about like 85%, we always say that that's more than enough to act on. So now let's also talk about which sentiment signal is actually worth sort of putting it in there. All right, let me first address the elephant in the room, NPS or CSAT. Most conversations I have about the right sentiment score to use sort of always revolve around NPS versus CSAT. But I think it's the wrong argument to begin with, because it treats sort of the whole thing as a matter of taste, but it isn't. It depends on your business model and what you're actually trying to learn. For this kind of specific job, like feeding a health score, the question actually isn't which metric has the better reputation. It's what a health score needs from a sentiment input in the first place. And I name 4 things. First one, it has to be recent, because a score is a statement about what's happening now. It has to be resolved, meaning it has to be granular enough to tell 2 different answers apart. It has to be comparable, so the same number will mean the same thing across your whole book. It has to be ownable by whoever you are holding accountable for it. Now, what the exemplified vendor did was to do an NPS once a year. Now let's put that yearly NPS against that. What we see is it actually fails all 4. Recency. Now, 1 data point a year means that for 11 months of the year, the sentiment input to your score is stale, right? And let's also be honest about what that actually ends up with. You end up with a score that updates weekly on usage, or maybe even way more frequent. And once a year sentiment, that just isn't a balanced score. It's kind of like a usage score with a little bit of sentiment decoration on it. Northwind is a great example, right? They were with the company for 12 months, but they had exactly 1 sentiment reading at month 5. Now, resolved. So this is my biggest beef with NPS. You give your respondents 0 to 10, 11 options, and then you immediately collapse it into 3. Like, that's just false precision. Because a 6 and a 2 are the same thing in NPS. They are not the same thing. And a 7 and a 6 kind of are the opposite, not opposite, but like different categories when they're actually very similar, basically the same answer. So the number you feed the score can't tell apart the answers that actually matter. Now, comparability. You can fight me on this. That kind of NPS is an industry standard. You can benchmark against it, blah, blah. But I will also tell you that culture moves NPS more than product quality. We did the research kind of not long ago and found that median NPS in Japan sits around 25, while median NPS in Spain sits around 67. So is it because Japanese products are worse? No, right? It's basically same, if not similar experience, but they are evaluated 40 points apart, depending on where the person answering happens to live, depending on their culture. Now, put that into your health score. Your Japanese accounts will read permanently at risk, while your Spanish accounts will read permanently fine. In the end, your CSMs will have to start prioritizing by geography or culture without this ever being their intention at all. And finally, ownable. Net Promoter Score is a metric that also reflects your pricing, product quality, marketing actions. So you're holding your CS team accountable for a number that basically moves when product ships something bad or when kind of you raise prices, maybe marketing isn't like bringing clients. That is just not a fair target only for your customer success team, right? And once a target isn't fair, people will stop trusting it. And that's why we all kind of started hating this NPS and anything that comes with it. So what happened then? About 3 years ago in Survicate, we actually stopped running NPS. And we are a customer feedback platform. So that was a slightly awkward conversation internally. Now, I know what what a chunk of you might be thinking, because I hear it constantly. You can't, maybe you're not able to sort of give up on NPS, kill it, because it's what because that's the number your executives ask for, or it's kind of affects somebody's bonus, etc. I have discussed it with many of my clients too. I've been like helping our clients for over 7 years to implement customer feedback programs into their own workflows. So I understand it's not something that everybody can just get rid of just like that. And I have a real sympathy for that. However, like usually the saddest part for me is usually the person who can see the problem isn't always the person with the authority to fix it. And of course, telling you to go and change your company's culture by next Thursday is not going to be the effective advice. However, my stance on this is keep NPS if you must, but use it more as a market benchmark or to pull out like promoters and detractors specifically, but just keep it sort of out of health score. And honestly, once you got this lifecycle feedback motion running, my experience is that people stop needing to use NPS in general. So that's kind of what we did. And we ended up replacing it with, drum rolls, 5 microservices placed on the customer's lifecycle, sort of instead of our calendar. You see it on the slide. What this helps with is that we can catch different aspects of customer outcome at sort of different stages of their lifecycle. For example, at day 15, we ask about their ease of use, because friction at early stages can turn into buyer's remorse. And we want to catch that before it happens. And around like month 11, we ask about their, or like around month 11, we ask about their renewal likelihood. This fires before like renewal conversation happens. In our case, at least this matches our client timeline. To measure it, we use a slight variation of product market fit. So, and after the first yearly cycle, each one of those surveys, they repeat annually. This way we can get a trend on each of our customers. So 3 things makes this usable as a score input for us. First of all, there is one scale across everywhere. All of these surveys that we run across customer lifecycle are rated from 1 to 5. Like it can be a star, it can be a smiley scale, anything, but the rating is always the same. This way, we get to add that up to a single number. Now, this is important because I actually have discussed with people who run kind of like NPS, CSAT, customer effort score, product market fit throughout their customer lifecycle, and then they create this metrics which brings those scores together with a calculation to get an aggregated score. Now, to me, that sounds like have you heard of sushi pizza? That whole thing sounds like that. Disturbing. Yeah. So anyway, next. It also has a defined action per outcome. That's kind of decided on the question. A test, like I always say, a test of a good question for me, what will we do differently if this outcome, if this comes back low? If you can't answer that, then I think you just delete the question. And third, the question asks about expectations, not feelings. Now, like I always say, never ask someone if they are happy. Happiness is a mood, but expectations are things that are actually rateable. And last thing before I move on, I want to remind you here is that the time frame. So all of these surveys, as I mentioned before, fire on our clients' calendars, connected to their customer lifecycle, not ours.
This was an amazing introduction about how important the accuracy and the way we capture data based on triggers. At Custify, we help customers to build health scores, and this part is super important to be noted. And how these health signals actually enter the score is also the second most important part, because we can have super accurate data, but it's also important how we weight our health scores in order to not have surprises at the end of the life cycle. So say you've made that switch that Eylul talked about, life cycle feedback instead of one yearly number, and that fixes what you are collecting, but it doesn't automatically fix what happens to it once it hits the score. And that's where most implementations still get it wrong. So where health scores are still not reflecting the values as they should. And a quick note here before the rules that I am about to present. I want this to be useful for everybody at whatever stage your team is at. If you're starting from nothing and you have some usage data there and a single NPS score, it's still better than nothing. So don't think that all your work was in blind. It still beats the flying blind. But these alone will most probably produce exactly the story we're talking about today on account that's technically active and reads fine right up until the cancellation email, because presence isn't the same as a relationship that's still intact. So let's see what we do in order to get the right health score in place. And here are 4 things to get it right. So first, don't drop sentiment in as one more equally weighted input next to usage. Usage, keep in mind, refreshes constantly. Logins, feature adoption, these refresh every day. Sentiment refreshes rarely, even if you trigger it based on lifecycle stage. Even on a good cadence, weight them the same and you will let it stall basically for months if you put the same average between a score that refreshes with a cadence and a login, for example, that refreshes daily. So let it get drowned out completely by the noise in daily usage and you will still not have a good health score there. Sentiment needs to function more like a modifier on the usage signal than a peer to it. And what does it mean in practice? That usually means that computing usage on its own, say 0 to 100, and letting sentiment shift that number within a capped band, 10 or 15 points either way, rather than blending the two into one shared average. So a single survey response cannot really and shouldn't be changing a score from green to red, neither the other way around. Second, weight it by how recent it is and let old responses fade. So a response from last week and a response from 5 months ago, should not carry the same confidence. As the sentiment data point ages, it should pull back toward unknown rather than sitting frozen at the value it came in at. So concretely, give every response a half-life, full weight for the current survey cycle, then taper it down a bit. Doesn't matter if the curve is linear or exponential. What matters is that there is a value, and then after a while with nothing new that came in, it's back to unknown and stops contributing to the health score. You're not punishing the account for going quiet. You're just no longer crediting it for an opinion that might not be actual anymore. Third, normalize by how many people actually answered the survey, not just what they said. So a response is only as trustworthy as its coverage. 5 responses out of 5 contacts you asked means something very different from 5 responses out of 50, right? So score it against how many people actually responded out of the ones that were questioned and use that number, not the raw number itself. So concretely, compute a response rate for every survey cycle, responders divided by contacts asked, for example, and use that percentage in the health score formula itself. When 90% of an account responds, you can trust that number as is, of course, but the score and the score can lean on it completely. You can trust this number to weight a bit more in the health score. But if a 20% response rate is given, this should for sure barely move the score, because doesn't matter how great the number looks, you can actually count of such a low response rate. Fourth, and this is the one people actually skip, it's non-response. This is also a signal, even if you consider that a null. Let's say in the formula, if an account goes 2 survey cycles, let's say, without answering anything, that's not missing data to shrug off, that's information, and it should move the score down and not sit there as neutral. So now, concretely, this sometimes can mean that somebody has to actively go get it. I'm talking now about the last option with no answers. Someone has to act on it, and how it, of course, depends on your business model. So if you are high touch, for example, and you are already running QBRs, that's your mechanism. Go in with 2 or 3 specific questions about what's changed since the last response, new stakeholder, shifted priority, a process that moved, and log the answer as data, so not just a meeting note. We use the answer that the customer provided as data to feed the health score. If you're tech touch, for example, with no standing QBR or cadence or anything periodic, you can send check-in emails, you can do some automations in order to gather some data in bulk and use that also to modify your health score based on the feedback provided by the ones that didn't answer. So either way, that becomes a manual input your system can feed into the score alongside the automated ones. And it doesn't have to come out of a survey to count. And what exactly this brings up to you? So the result here, luckily, is that you will have fewer false positives. You stop panicking over usage dips that are seasonal and harmless, and real lead time on things usage alone can see, like disengagement, a contact who's gone quiet, sentiment sliding before login numbers do. It won't catch everything, of course, but it moves you from we found out at renewal, like it happened with our example, to we had weeks of warning. So that gap is the whole point of building this. And yeah, I guess now that we have all these rules on the table, we can take them back to the account and see where each of them would actually have fired.
Yes, let's do that. All right, guys. So we are beginning the autopsy. Are you ready? Fantastic. So let's go back to Northwind account that the composite account in the beginning for real quick. So they canceled at their renewal that their reason was too expensive. And here's the same timeline that we saw earlier. And the way kind of we read it is that there are not three separate causes of death. Actually, there is one kind of root cause and three system failures that let all of this thing run for like 9 months without anybody noticing it. And in this autopsy, we will basically be focusing on those failures. So the first one is survivorship hole. The first time anyone at the vendor asked Northwing a question was around like month 5, and by then it has been over 4 months since the account was drifting. What this means? So the obvious fix that could come to your mind, which come to our mind, was that add something during onboarding, which is right, but this could also be the catch, because the obvious way to build anything during the onboarding to catch that is to trigger it sort of based on behavior, right? Something happens in the product, right, and then you build your first and then you trigger some message like you built your first thing, so we ask you if it works. It's reasonable, of course. I have also built like a trigger sentiment like that myself. But when we actually look at what it does, a customer who got set up, the survey fires, they answer. But a customer who never got there, never crosses the threshold, the survey never fires. So structurally, they are kind of unreachable. As a result, you end up building a feedback system that only talks to customers who succeed, and then we got to wonder why results never match their churn number. So what would have caught it? An ease of use check on their first month, triggered by the customer's lifecycle. This is critical to catch any kind of early friction early before it turns into any kind of buyer's remorse, right? Northwind's sort of this integration problem was happening in exactly around that window. So a time-triggered question here could land in the middle of it and ask something that they would have had a very clear answer to. And of course, it kind of goes without saying, but any open comment or low sentiment has to automatically start a conversation, not weeks later, months later. It has to reach the human the same day, and it has to close the loop with the client, ideally within the same day. I think, Irina, you have one thing to add here, correct?
Yes. So I want to mention also, because we talked about catching health scores, red flags early, and I can add a number underneath that. So through months 2 and 3, the score most teams would build here still reads as green, right? Because it's averaging engagement across who's active, and 4 people using it heavily every day averages out beautifully. Now, 4 out of 12 seats, though, is 33%. So that's the number that should be moving the score, not the 4 people active. We talked in our case about flat activity. So the number of active users didn't actually tell us anything in terms of churn risk there. We looked at the wrong number from a usage perspective. And second, we should, of course, stop scoring flat, active or not, and start scoring active seats as a percentage of seats bought. But not only that, we should also talk the same way we talk about sentiment triggers, sentiment surveys triggered by lifecycle stage. The usage is also important to be segmented, because the signals that matter in week 1 when it comes to usage and what your customers are doing in the platform, activation, first login, setup completion, and things like this, aren't the signals that matter in month 3. So again, in our case, we didn't actually look at the progress. We just looked at some flat activity, and nothing moved the needle in terms of customer health there.
Exactly. Okay. So let's move on to the next one then. Thank you for the addition, by the way, Irina. That's 100%. So second cause of that, invisible passive. Now, what do we see here is that just 1 second. Okay, so what do we know about them? At month 5, their annual NPS goes out to 12 contacts and 2 people answered. Champion, they give a 7. We didn't have any promoters, we didn't have any detractors, we had 2 passives. Now, like, my question is, raise your hand if you have a playbook for passives, right? Would you like one? Hit me up after the session on LinkedIn. But to me, this speaks louder than anything, because I think, because think about who gave that 7. It's the account champion. So a 7 from that person is actually not going to be neutral. It's somebody sort of being polite about a disappointment. And that's kind of basically what Irina was talking about, giving the example of 8 in grace, but with a renewal attached to it. At the same time, there is also a second failure within this whole thing that's stuck on top of the first one. 10 people, they didn't answer, and 10 non-respondents sort of treated as neutral. Irina already mentioned it previously, but no response is not a signal, it's not a null. Is a signal, it's not a null. So this is what it costs, right? So one of them was the ops person who hit a wall in week 3 because silence speaks words. By the time someone actually stops responding to you, they've usually kind of already clocked out. So what would have actually caused it? A value delivery question after their onboarding. Like in our case, for example, in our case, we do it around 4th month, but in their case, probably it would fit around like second or third month, and asking the question that actually mattered, which is whether they are actually getting the value that they expected from the product. Or let's
and that's my
Yeah.
Let me take this one because that's my favorite, let's say. So this is the third cause. The champion left the company. So what happened with our account? At month 6, if I remember, the point where the VP of operations, the champion, he left. It was a person that was involved from the beginning. So the person who actually bought the tool and who ran the internal case for that. So who actually answered all the CSM's emails and all the interactions that we initiated with the account. And this person is gone. New role doesn't matter where. What matters is that the score is what the score saw when it happened. Nothing. So the score didn't see anything. Why? Because usually the seats stay active. Everyone else keeps logging in, so it's not a decrease in the usage. The product doesn't log you out, let's say, automatically. So you just you are just kept there, still active. Usage held steady. If your score is built on usage plus a lagging sentiment number, this account reads green right up until it doesn't, right? So there's no sign in our situation regarding the champion leaving. And what I want to be straight with everyone here, because it's the honest version and not the flattering one, sentiment doesn't catch this. Usage signal doesn't catch this either. There's no clean input for the person who cared just left, no login event fires, no survey triggers. They answered when the survey was fired before actually this person left the company. So there was no red flag there neither. And sometimes there isn't even a bounced email if the old address forwards for a while. So the closest proxy we have is contact level engagement. I think did this specific person's activity drop to 0, not just the accounts. And even that only tells you that someone went quiet. So you still don't know that the champion completely left the company. And it doesn't tell you why, it doesn't tell you in time for this to matter. So if I'm honest about what would actually have worked here, it isn't a metric at all. I think it's a person, a genuine personal check-in with that relationship, not a survey and not a dashboard alert. And it's the only thing that reliably would have caught this in time. this one is still open. We're just naming it because pretending we'd caught it would be worse than admitting we haven't. But yeah, if anybody has a different idea, you can feel free to write on chat too.
Awesome. I will just add one thing here, and I actually completely agree. The thing that would have caught it is going to be a person, a real check-in with that relationship. That's kind of like the perfect solution if you have more of a high-touch customer success motion, right? But if you're like me, when you're heavily relying on digital customer success because you are trying to serve thousands of customers with a team that could fit in the palm of your hand, unfortunately, some of you may not be able to afford to put a human relationship on every account. So instead, what I would recommend, and what I do in my team, is to stack kind of these 2 weak signals until they are together worth a human touch. So first one is like logins from a high usage contact. You have the logins from a high usage contact that's dropped. On its own, kind of exactly as Irina said, it will not mean much. People can go on holiday, daily, like whirlwind happens, priorities change, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they didn't log in. It doesn't actually mean anything. But two, in this scenario, of course, I'm imagining that you are already capturing customer pulse surveys throughout the lifecycle. That same contact kind of stops answering all your pulse surveys. So while either one doesn't actually mean much, but when you put both of them together, on the person that actually bought your product is worth pairing to an alert that with a name on it, because this way, in my opinion, you get to have the relationship signal inside a digital first motion as well. Okay, so then that is actually a wrap. So 2 minutes, and then we will start taking questions. So at the very start, so basically what we know so far is that Northwind died in week 3, and we found out about it in month 12. Of course, none of these months belong to somebody who could have kind of done something with them. What it means is that the whole conclusion here is a health score that's built. Health score is worth building because it sort of shrinks that gap. And it shrinks it only if it uses both usage and sentiment, weighted and with kind of something attached to every signal. Also, we have a small surprise for you. After the webinar, together with the recording, of course, we'll also be sending you an autopsy kit. It's going to be kind of one file. You can paste it into whatever LLM that you are using, Claude, GPT, doesn't matter. And it's kind of meant to help you walk backwards through your last churned accounts with kind of pre-given instructions. Here, kind of we did Northwind together. Now you can go and apply the same methodology to your actual customers to see what are the gaps in your health score and feedback process. Perfect. So let's take questions.
Thank you so much. Yes, we have a few questions. I see that Simeon is already answering some of them. And we also had a few questions from the registration form. So which ones would you like to take first?
We can maybe start with the live ones, if possible. And then if we have some time, maybe we'll go to the form. Is that okay?
Okay, so yeah, the first one then, do you have experience on which channel is best regarding the answer rate for the microsurvey, email and Apple messaging?
I love this question. I think it kind of correlates 2 questions, right? Because we also have another one, which is how do you kind of increase response rate? Is there any tricks that you guys use for that? I can take it. That's actually one of my sort of favorite questions, because of course here we kind of talked about, okay, your customer has to give the sentiment and you can add it to health score, but what if they are not actually replying to your survey? That's probably the first thing that you need to solve here. So first thing is what I always tell to our clients is context always beats any kind of frequency. Like if you write to support, imagine this, right? You write to support team and then you get an answer, how did we do, straight after. That's not going to be annoying because you kind of expect it. But a random email reaching to you, some random point after you purchase the product, asking how do you feel about the product, it's kind of strange because you didn't really do anything to warrant that question. So the single best lever that has always proven to be effective for us is when do you actually like what is the context of sending that survey to your customers, right? You need to ask right after the thing the question sort of is about. Like, they finish their onboarding, something about onboarding. They are, I don't know, they did something in the product, something about that. So make it more, make it kind of try to make it specific so that people actually expect to receive that question. Second is to make it low commitment. One question in the product on sort of like, what works the best, especially, is right now I'm kind of answering the first question, but what works best for us is questions that are kind of asked within the product. It also shows in the response rate metrics because it gets answered a lot more often than emails. However, what works the best, at least for me, is kind of following up to turn it into a multi-channel survey. Like if you're sending it first, you're inside your product, and people they saw it and they didn't reply, then carry it to an email or ask it once again without being too pushy, of course. That's kind of the thing that really helps with any kind of response rate. And finally, make it low commitment. Of course, you cannot expect anyone to sit down and try complete a survey for 10 minutes. Respect their time, use micro surveys, and those are usually the foolproof ways that we always help our clients to also increase their response rates.
Thank you. Irina, is there anything you would like to add?
I totally agree with what Eli said. In our case, we also have a very small module for surveys, and what we also do is encouraging people to actually customize the follow-ups as much as possible in order to get the right people and to get their attention in order to get better answers. And it always works. And even if you are inputting your survey numbers from a different tool into ours, is the same. It's either the customers have to feel unique or special, even if it's an automated follow-up on that survey request. So this is what we usually keep in mind when we are advising people to reach out for better response rates.
Thank you. There is a very nice, I think, follow-up question about how to avoid over-communicating. I see that there was also a question before that, but I think that this one will follow up the whole thing really nicely.
This is a tough one because my first question would be, what constitutes over communicating? When are you over communicating actually? So survey, I can speak from the customer sentiment perspective. Survey fatigue is a thing, so you don't want to send a lot of kind of feedback to your customers, but it all comes back to the relevance once again, because if someone is expecting it, if they are if at the moment it doesn't sound weird, then I don't think there is any danger of over surveying or over communicating, at least in that context. But if you're talking about over communicating in a sense that sending a lot of messages to your customers, well, one thing that I always tell my team, your every message has to be bringing a value to the customer. So a message like, hey, I was just wondering how you're doing, how is it going with the product? No, delete that. Don't send that. If a CSM sends me a message like that, I'll be really pissed, to be honest, because it gives me nothing. Every communication, it has to have a meaning. It has to have a purpose. So if you're going to send any message to your customer, then make sure that together with that message always delivers a value. And I believe then they won't be too worried about you communicating often, because at the end of the day, they will see that the conversation that they are receiving from you is actually valuable to them.
I think it really boils back to the conversation we had about lifecycle triggered surveys, because if it's based on behavior, they will know why they received that survey. They will know why they received that email. So it's always linked to something that they did or a milestone they achieved. And yes, again, the way we communicate that, putting that not a spam, but something valuable for them is for sure the key to avoid over communication.
Super, thank you. I think we have time for 2 more questions tops. So this is one. How do you catch a champion living without a human input?
I think if I can start, and then Eylul, you can continue, because it's exactly what we've talked before this webinar. So again, it really depends on the way your business operates, high touch versus low touch. When I said in my presentation a human, it was more like a human or an automation, let's say. But for sure, if your health scores are based on trends, they are very well weighted, you will observe that, because again, in our example, we talked about a person that was left there still active, but we counted some seats in the platform, not actual usage, not actual triggers that would show us that a person left. So a champion leaving, although active in the platform, active as a seat, active but not generating activity, will be a good trigger if health score is really based on trend. And when I mean a trend, for example, counting the activity that the user generated in the last month versus the activity it has 2 months ago, let's say, it will observe already a big drop in the activity, and it will trigger an alert to let you know that something is strange. This is a first sign that the champion can leave. Yeah. And it doesn't require human input, because it's basically based on automations. Yes.
I can go a step further on that. So I'm also, because I'm also leading sales team, and this kind of automations, they are not used so commonly in customer success recently, but in sales they are very popular. Enrichment is actually a way that you can approach this. Like it requires some budget, not gonna lie, it's not gonna be cheap, but it's possible that you can actually trigger an automation. For example, when your account, when you see that a account, or not an account, a user that used to be logging in very often, their logins dropped, then that can trigger a list or something like this on some enrichment tool. Clay would be a good example of this, where it will basically run an automation in the background to check on LinkedIn, for instance, whether or not this person still keeps their same job title, and and then that could kind of give an alert to your customer success, or maybe triggers something different on your customer success platform. That could be a kind of a way to play around and actually turn it into sort of more of a full-on automation of how to identify a champion leaving. So that's what I would recommend. Use enrichment tools. Probably could get, I don't know. I guess nowadays they're pretty good, 70-80% success rate. You could probably reach with something like that.
Oh, super. Thank you. I don't see any more questions. We have a few from the registrations. If I know we're at time and I see people started leaving, I think that's the one more question, whatever one you choose, that I shared with you in the speakers chat, and I think that we have to wrap.
Actually, I really like this one. How do you tell difference between an account that's quiet because it's fine and an account that's quiet because it's at risk? Because I feel like we answered a lot of feedback related questions. So love to have a little bit on the custom CX questions.
I kind of feel this is tied to the previous discussion. So in terms of a health signal, an account that is not engaged can mean the same thing as an account that, I don't see the question, the full question anymore. Yeah, so an account that it's fine, but it's not answering can be treated exactly like an account that is at risk. But again, if we look at the usage and in detail what they do, and even without any human interaction there, it's very tied to what we answered previously. You can observe the behavior of what the customer is actually doing, and you can say that, okay, they are not in the mood for talking or responding to emails, they avoid meetings, but they are still using the product. So that's a good sign that they will probably renew. So yeah, it's a longer conversation here, but it boils back also to what we previously discussed.
I agree, actually, nothing to add. Really greatly summarized. Perfect. Olga, sorry, you were on the stage. Okay.
No, I was just saying, I was just thanking you for a very insightful discussion. I really liked it, and I really liked the approach. I also see that there are a lot of comments saying that it was very useful. So yeah, I will be sending the recording of the webinar a bit later to everyone who has signed up for the webinar. And thank you so much for joining us. We had a really good show up rate. So ladies, if you have anything else to add, please do.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. It was great seeing you. We're very thankful that you you were here together with us, and for your questions and everything. So yeah, if anything, please do follow. We'd love to stay in touch. We'd love to stay connected. So please do add me on LinkedIn. I think we can send it together with the email.
Yeah, I can send it. We'll send it in the chat here, or
Yeah,
we'll just send
good.
it.
Awesome. Perfect. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure.
Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.